Snow hammered against the cafe windows the way life sometimes hammers against the human soul, cold, relentless, uninvited. Jackson Hale, a man the world admired but few truly knew, sat alone at a corner table in a quiet Seattle coffee shop, staring into a cup he had no intention of drinking. The weight of grief pressed on him like an anchor. Ever since losing his wife 2 winters ago, silence had become his only companion. But that morning, as frost crept across the glass and the world outside blurred into white, a tiny voice shattered the silence inside him. A little girl, pale and shivering, clutching a worn teddy bear, looked up at him with eyes too tired for someone so young. And with a trembling breath, she asked, "Can I sit here? If you believe the world still has room for kindness, compassion, and second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. It truly helps us bring more stories like this to you." Jackson's first instinct was to retreat. He was a man of boundaries, and the grief he carried often made him wary of the world around him. But something in the girl's face, something fragile and lost, stopped him from saying no. He nodded, and she climbed slowly onto the seat across from him, her small hands wrapped around the teddy bear as if it were the only thing holding her together. Her yellow knit hat was dusted with snow, and her breath came in soft, uneven puffs. Jackson could sense that she wasn't just cold. She was unwell. Years of reading people in business meetings had taught him how to recognize silent battles, and this child was fighting one he couldn't yet understand. The cafe was warm, but the air around her felt thin, like someone who had spent too long outside in more ways than one. She told him her name was Harper, though her voice barely rose above a whisper. She didn't explain why she was alone, nor why she had chosen him, a stranger in a dark coat, hunched over his own sorrow, when there were many others she could have approached. Jackson's heart, scarred though it was, felt an old ache return. His wife, Anna, had dreamed of children. Her laughter used to fill their home like sunbeams. Now, the silence felt too loud. He noticed Harper rubbing her chest, her eyelids fluttering from exhaustion. Something was wrong. He asked if she was waiting for someone, but her answer was a quiet shake of her head. She mentioned her mom was working nearby and that she often stayed warm in the cafe until her shift ended. Jackson couldn't help but question whether that was the full truth. A child this sick should never be wandering anywhere alone. Minutes stretched, melting into something softer, something almost healing. Harper, despite her frailness, had a way of drawing stories out of him, stories he hadn't spoken aloud since Anna passed. He found himself telling her about the cabin he used to visit with his wife, the flowers she loved, the nights they stayed awake dreaming of the family they would one day have. Harper listened as if every word mattered. And maybe it did. Because sometimes, strangers are the only ones who truly hear the things we never say to those closest to us. But as she listened, her small shoulders began to slump. A cough rattled through her chest, deep, painful, wrong. Jackson felt panic punch through him, sharp and sudden. He reached across the table, steadying her as she swayed. She admitted then, in a strained voice, that she had been sick for a long time. Her mom couldn't always afford the treatments, and Harper didn't want to make things harder. She didn't want to be a burden. She said it with a timid smile, as though comforting him rather than herself. Jackson's throat tightened. He saw himself in the reflection of her struggle, not as a child, but as a man who understood the fear of losing someone you love. Here was a little girl trying to be stronger than her body would allow. And here he was, a man whose wealth meant nothing in the face of personal loss, until now, when suddenly it meant everything. When Harper's mother, Claire, rushed into the cafe, breathless and frantic, Jackson stood immediately. Claire looked exhausted, the kind of exhaustion that came from working 2 or 3 jobs and still falling short. Relief flooded her face when she saw her daughter safe, but fear crept in the moment she saw Harper's condition. She apologized endlessly, explaining how she had been let off work late during an emergency at the hotel where she cleaned rooms. Harper had insisted she'd be okay waiting. Claire's voice trembled as she confessed she couldn't afford another hospital visit unless it became life or death. Jackson felt something shift inside him, like a door he had kept bolted for years cracking open. He couldn't walk away. Not from Harper. Not from this moment. He offered to drive them to the hospital, and though Claire hesitated, aware of how the world usually worked for people without money, she finally agreed. At the hospital, doctors admitted Harper quickly, diagnosing a worsening respiratory condition that needed immediate treatment. Sitting in the harsh fluorescent glow of the waiting room, Jackson realized he wasn't afraid of losing himself anymore. He was afraid of losing this child he had only just met. And he knew then that fate had led Harper to his table that morning for a reason. As days passed, Jackson stayed. He sat with Claire, supported Harper's treatments, and used his connections to bring in specialists who could give her a fighting chance. For the first time in years, hope returned to his life, not in loud bursts, but in small, steady heartbeats. Harper improved slowly. Her laughter, soft, raspy, but real, became something Jackson lived for. Claire, overwhelmed by his generosity, tried to refuse help, but Jackson insisted. Not because he was a CEO, not because he was wealthy, but because Harper had reminded him of love, of healing, of what it meant to choose life again. In time, Jackson and Claire formed a bond shaped by shared worry, long nights, and a growing trust neither expected. Harper became the thread that stitched their broken pieces together. She wasn't just a child he helped. She became family in ways that words could never fully capture. If this story has touched your heart, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us keep telling meaningful stories that bring warmth into the world. Before we end, tell us in the comments, what part of this story moved you the most? Jackson often thought back to that snowy morning in the cafe, the day a fragile little girl looked up at a lonely man and asked, "Can I sit here?" He had thought he was the one offering her a seat. But in truth, she was the one offering him a place to begin again. And through kindness, courage, and the unexpected grace of second chances, they all found that sometimes the smallest voice can break the deepest silence, and change a life forever.